Injury prevention is a huge thing for me. It's what I spent a lot of my time doing, working with some of the best physiotherapists in the world. I was very lucky. One of the most important things I think I was ever taught was to define the difference between flexibility and mobility. So a lot of runners in particular, a lot of people, when you hear it, it's like, oh, I'm always injured, you should become more flexible, or I should stretch more. It's not true. Flexibility is just another thing that has a particular advantage to some sports. If you're a dancer or a ballerina, flexibility is vitally important, but that flexibility could also cause you injury if you're too flexible or you're not flexible and you're not balanced. Mobility is the thing that stops people getting injured, and that's when we add strength into the mix. And that's why it's important when you look at runners or cyclists who might be avoiding strength work, you can say to them, this is what mobility is. It's flexibility plus strength. That flexibility, that stretching, that yoga that you're doing might be good to help you recover as an active recovery, but it's not necessarily meaning you're going to avoid injury in the future. You need to make sure that muscles are strong at their end range. That's when muscles tend to go or snap, is when they're pushed upon their end range and they haven't got the capacity to deal with that load that's going through them. So for example, a common injury is a hamstring pull or tear in a runner. They'll overstride, their heel will hit the floor, and because it's an overstride, their hamstring's in an eccentric position. It's longer than what it should be, and that weight that's going through that heel will pull on the hamstring. If they can get into that eccentric position, so by doing deadlifts and things where they've got a good range of movement and they can put their body weight at least through it and then some, that is going to be a lot less likely to cause injury because they're used to that weight going through that particular muscle. So that's the way we need to think about it when we're going on injury prevention, and that's why we can get away with prescribing 3 to 4 to 5 reps, because we're focused on getting them strong. Now, one thing you might come across is that runners might think, oh, I'm going to get muscly and big and this, that and the other, and it's going to have a negative effect on my performance. Injury will negatively affect their performance, and by doing 3 to 4 to 5 reps, as you will know, if their calories aren't there to support that, they're not going to get bigger, they're not going to get muscly. And even then, people like Alex Viado would probably question whether, all of this muscle is detrimental at all. I would say too much muscle is, because it goes into body weight and body composition is very important when you're looking at the longer distances. There's no doubt about it. If someone's higher in body fat, then they're not going to perform as well if they were lower. And it's the same as if you've got a lot of excess muscle. Muscle density and strength is important. That overall weight of muscle, if you've got someone that's just as strong but lighter, then they're going to perform better. So it's getting that ideal body composition right, and making sure that they're aware of that, and this is why you're making them strong, and it's not going to have that negative effect on their performance. You can also focus on things like jump height and stuff, which will also have a positive effect on someone running. But what we're training for is that inevitable wrong step. When trail running, often ankles will roll, they'll fall, they'll slip. Obstacle course racing, there's the amount of times that they'll fall off of obstacles, or fall down, or jump too high, or land wrong, or fall and hit a rib onto something, and you're not going to prevent those kind of rib bone break. You can't prevent that as a coach, but what you can have a go at preventing and be really successful is trying to stop them from rolling their ankles, or if they do roll, have the strength not to pull a ligament. So we can do that quite effectively and quite easily as coaches, and that adaptation happens quite quickly. You can see how quickly someone can open up a dynamic movement. But yeah, break the rules when it comes to their injury prevention. So knees over toes, we're all taught initially not to squat knees over toes. Well, that's not sport specific. When you look at footballers changing directions, and rugby players and trail runners are always knees over toe all the time. So what advantage would it have that we kind of avoid that in their strength program? So a simple thing you can do, for example, is put a step down in the gym, have their heels elevated, and have them slowly, body weight, slowly control a squat over their knees. And as long as it's controlled, and as long as you're getting regular feedback, how does that feel from the client, it is perfectly safe and has an advantage and crossover to their sport. As well as that, their movement patterns and their even things like their tibia and fibia length and femur length might dictate that they should have their knees slightly over their toes, or not perfectly aligned to have a better squat. Don't always chase neutral, I suppose, and try and you can replicate as long as you don't go too specific. Eccentric loading is a really good way as well. So like I said about that deadlifting to stop that overextension to a hamstring, deadlifting is great. It's a great movement to build strength in a number of areas, as you know, but it's a concentric action again. So if you look at a Nordic, for example, it's something that I have that in every one of my runners' training programs, and it's a very common thing that people suck at it because they're not used to eccentrically loading that hamstring. But that's exactly what will happen if someone overstrides, and it's preparing them for that. And it's a great way to build strength in hamstrings. And what you'll find quite often when people lack a lot of mobility in that area is they'll cramp up. And that cramp is an example that muscle's weak, it's fatigued, and that's what causes that cramp. A lot of people will go to cramp all the time, being electrolyte balance being wrong, or a number of reasons of what causes cramp. But the main reason is unfamiliar movement pattern and fatigue. They're the two main reasons that cause cramp, and we can avoid that. And cramp is a massive thing for endurance athletes. If we can strengthen those muscles up to deal with that load that's going through them, then we're less likely to get cramp. Build dynamic mobility movements into the program, so don't worry too much about static stretching. I don't think I ever statically stretch, ever, and I definitely don't statically stretch with people after a workout or after a long run to do it. If you're looking at cooling someone down, then a walk is fine, or it's a movement at least. If you've got a tired muscle, think about if your chest is really tight and you've got DOMs in your chest and you're statically stretching it to its end range, that's when it's most likely to pop or ping. So making sure that you're dynamically cooling it down or warming it up, so just moving it with a slight bit of body weight, some very light pressing if it's particularly bad, will help better than a static stretch. So I see no role in static stretching. Some PNF stretching is good from time to time, but as many dynamic movements as you can into that, and we're going to go through some of those as well. The plan, rest and optimize recovery. The easiest way to do this is to do an RPE scale and see how hard their effort level is, and how they feel before a workout, and how they felt during. And you can get those RPE numbers, and you can kind of see roughly how that's the easiest way. But there are a number of ways that you can go about it, depending on diet and things like that. And Ian King's got some good stuff out there. That's a full episode on its own. It's a full unit. So hopefully we can do a Q&A on that, and we can talk about that in some great detail later on. Foam rollers are not a long-term solution. If you've got an injury that's caused by compression, i.e. an IT band that's causing compression onto your hip from overuse, adding more compression to that area isn't necessarily the best thing in my opinion. A lot of other physios may disagree, but I very rarely use them. I might use them to warm a muscle up or try and increase its range of motion, but it's only a short-term fix. A foam roller is painful, and I always think if I'm going through that pain, I'd rather be able to get the movement pattern more effective than just have after the foam roll 2 hours later it being back. I'd rather work on particular movement patterns that keep my posture better long term, or keep my body in a certain way forever. Consistency is key for all of this, making sure that it's done regularly. So don't do a 40-minute mobility session. Show them 10 to 20 mobility exercises and sneak it into do this before runs. Or if you're doing something like intrinsic foot strength, which we'll touch on, might be like a little towel crunch or crunching their toes together to work on that intrinsic foot strength. Just do it while they're sat in the office and set social cues to remind them. Little dot on their monitor at work or something like that will remind them to do that. Or their seating position at work is going to be really important. But creating that consistency to make sure everything's right is going to be key to making sure that their performance, when you've got it, their adaptive energy when they are ready to work out is high, rather than having a low adaptive energy where they're not in the mood because they're injured or they're fed up because they're tight and things like that. And then we can also go into coaching basic running form. Now, you're not a running coach, I should think. You might be. If you are, then brilliant. But coaching basic running form we can know the principles of it. But if you are unsure about any of these things, obviously don't be scared to assign out. It's not, I think saying I don't know or it's not my area of expertise isn't said enough in this industry. There are some amazing running coaches out there that can work on gait and stride analysis, and they will make your job even easier when that runner comes back to you and is moving in a very efficient way.